Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door Net Admin. First, I'm going to start off by saying I hear you all. If you're watching on 1.5 speed or 2 speed for the sake of your sanity, that's fine. If you want me to talk less, I'm working on it. Promise. One of the things that somebody asked me about more recently was about Acme implementation. I did several videos a long ways back about Acme, the Acme protocol for managing certificates. And I did a little bit of implementation and demonstrated how I would implement it on Windows. And I did this because I figured Windows is probably going to be the place that people would need the most help, either because A, it's Windows and most of the implementations are Linux based, but also because there's a lot of servers that are running Windows that need a little more hand holding, shall we say. But in order to talk about implementing this on Linux, that was the request. So I'm going to talk a little bit, not about a step-by-step to implementing it on Linux, because really it kind of boils down to read the instructions. But I want to actually tell you about two of the tools that I use in a Linux environment, what they're good for, and where I would choose each one to suit what I consider to be its strengths. So here we go. The very first tool that I'm going to be talking about is Dehydrated. It's one that I've been using for many years, basically since Let's Encrypt came out and I started using it. It's just a shell script. I like shell scripts. They're easy for me to read through and parse. And if I need to fiddle around with it, I don't have to drop into a different language just to deal with it. I can run the commands in Bash as is. Dehydrated itself has a lot of functionality, but not all of it is built in. It relies on hook scripts in order to implement functionality that exists outside of the main script itself. Dehydrated can do wildcard domains, great, but you can only verify those through DNS. That's an important point. The instructions are pretty basic. You put your list of domains in a domains txt, or you can call it whatever you want. That's fine. It's just a list of certificates line by line with what you want to be the names on the certificate behind it. The first one is the canonical name, and the others are the subject alternative names. Easy. You can also do aliases, and you can also, when you do that, you can add separate config files with overrides for it. Okay, so that's documentation that's good to read. The well-known, this includes thoughts about your well-known directory, specifically for HTTP 01. And this is your web directory, essentially, where Dehydrated will put the files for verification from Let's Encrypt. And there's example configs in there as well. The usage section, that's on this page right here, so that's fine. The config file can go in several different places. If you've installed it through a package manager, it'll probably be under etc, because that's pretty standard. But if you're using the version off of Git directly, which you can do, and I do, then you can configure this to be in a few different locations, including just current working directory or the directory from which the script itself was run. And the procedure for doing this is fairly basic. You would start with registering an account key, okay? And then once you have that, then you can do your C, which is cron, but this is how you sign, renew, and otherwise issue certificates, is with the cron parameter, because this is really expected to just be set up in cron, and then you let it go. If you want to specify the domain instead of using domains.txt, you can. That's fine. keep going. If you're using this in a cron job, you probably want it to continue on to the other certificates if a previous one had an error. Yeah, okay. And there's a bunch of other things that you can set to customize how this runs. So where do I use this? I use Dehydrated specifically when I need to answer HTTP 01 validation. That's pretty much it. That's not the only place. I actually do have hook scripts set up in a couple of legacy deployments that will actually email me the information that I need to set things up in DNS. And that's the key point here. The HTTP 01 validation is built into Dehydrated. You don't need anything else. If you want to do anything with DNS, you need to implement a hook script. And then Dehydrated will call the hook script when it needs to deploy the DNS entries or when it needs to clean up those DNS entries. And those hook scripts are separate. They're not maintained in Dehydrated. They're not part of Dehydrated. You can write your own if that's what you'd like to do. Or you can download one from another project if that's what you want to do. The hook script is something that makes Dehydrated very extensible, but it also makes it much more difficult to implement if you're doing DNS and you're a beginner who doesn't really know what you're doing and how to make it work. I was there myself at one point. I understand still what it is like. So I just use Dehydrated to integrate directly with Apache if I have some Apache sites that are doing native HTTP 01 validations, and that's all I need to do. I think Dehydrated is perfect for that. The other script that I would use would be acme.sh, which again is a pure shell script. I love me those shell scripts. And it has a lot, I mean a lot of features. If Dehydrated is extensible, acme.sh is not so much extensible so much as it includes all the bells and whistles in its own code. And it is hugely complicated. And the documentation is just as complicated as the functionality is. But you can see it supports many different CAs. So does Dehydrated, but you have to configure it manually. These are supported right out of the box. And by default, it won't even issue from Let's Encrypt. It issues from 0SSL, which I usually forget and then go, oh, I didn't want it from that CA. Fix it, reissue it, off we go. Web root mode, standalone mode, it does support TLS ALPN. Again, so does Dehydrated, but you need to set up the TLS ALPN endpoint yourself. Apache mode, Nginx mode, DNS alias mode, stateless mode. There are so many options with this. It even comes with, here's your one command to install it and register it. Okay. Or you can install from Git. It's just issue a cert. I find this very misleading because this is not telling you anything about how the certificate is being issued, whether it's through web root mode, whether it's through standalone mode, who knows, and then install the cert. You can use the standalone server, you can all of this. There is so much documentation. This is why I say just read the instructions. Really just read the instructions. So why do I use this if this is so complicated? This is why. The automatic DNS API integration. If you go and you look at it, there is a ton of DNS providers that are supported. A ton. And this may not even be all of it. If we take a look at the more pages there, DNS API, yep, okay. Oh, look at that, DNS API 2. There's more of them. There's more of them in another page. Although this is up to 186 and the first one also goes up to not to 186. So they are somewhat different. You might find one under DNS API, you may find it under DNS API 2, but there's a lot of providers in here. And for each one of these, if I just go to Cloudflare, okay, cool. Here's method 1, method 2. It shows what you need to export and then how you need to issue it. You'll notice when you're issuing it, you need to specify DNS and specify your particular provider, and then you can go and install it to the server from there. So acme.sh has a lot more supported DNS providers, which makes it really good for supporting that out of the box. Also, it's a good idea to get familiar with it because a lot of plugins that you see in other systems, for example, OpenSense uses acme.sh as a plugin to issue certificates, or it can use it as a plugin to issue certificates, and I do. Proxmox virtual environment, that includes acme.sh if you're going to be issuing certificates. So understanding a little bit of how this works behind the scenes can really assist you in your troubleshooting. But again, for the simplicity of just, I need this to sit and issue a certificate from Let's Encrypt, and it's just through Apache and it's just HTTP 01, I'll usually go for the simplicity of Dehydrated. But if I need to do something with DNS and I need it to run fully automated, I'm going to go with acme.sh. I just am, because it's got all of that built in, but it requires a lot of reading. I know I'm repeating myself, but do your reading. Read all of the stuff that is here, because the wiki is extensive. Remember, you're looking at all of these pages, and some of them are important. Some of them are not as important, like preferred chain. Maybe you don't need to deal with a preferred chain. Okay, fine. But at a minimum, I would be looking at things like deploy hooks. Do I need a hook? Do I need to deploy this to Apache server? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. DNS API. Okay, so that's down here. There we go. I'm going to read that. Am I going to take a look at how to install, how to issue a certificate? Yes to both of them. I'm going to read all of these things that seem to be related to what I want to do, because that's how I'm going to figure out how to do it smoothly and with a minimum amount of errors and other faffing around. But so if you're doing this in Linux, you're probably already familiar with reading the instructions and figuring some of this out. So hopefully, just, being pointed at, here's a couple of the tools that I use and that work really well for me, has been useful for you, and I won't have to take up all your time with all the talking of how to actually do both of these. So hopefully that's been of use to you. Like I said, if you have thoughts on other things you'd like to hear me talk about, whether at great length or in minimalist fashion, either one is fine, but feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door NetAdmin, and we will see you next time.